Hi guys, we're going to be going over the unit circle and how I memorized it for testing purposes. You'll be giving a blank unit circle, and this is how I would fill it out. First thing is you'll have some information you have to know. Typically it's the numbers 2, 3, 4, and 6 in that order. I also like to memorize the numbers 5, 7, and 11. Those are easy to remember and will give you a big portion of the unit circle right off the bat. So let's start. The first thing you're going to want to do is figure out your positives and negative sides of the unit circle. It's based off the x and y axes, with the first being the x-axis and the second being the y. The top right quadrant is a plus plus because they're both positives. The top left quadrant is a negative and plus for x and y. The bottom left is negative negative due to both x and y being in the negatives of the third quadrant. And the fourth quadrant is negative plus. And this will affect your x's and y's respectively. So the very first thing you're going to want to do once you get unit circle out and you write down all this known information is write out your angles, starting with 0 and 360 on the far right, and work your way around. I normally do the 90-degree angles first. After 90 and 180, of course, and then 270 for the bottom. After that, you fill in the rest with the 30 degree, 15, 30. And I will start that here. This will be 30 and 330. There. Magic of editing. Okay, so after we get our degrees all written out so that we can reference them later and not have to figure them out, we're going to start using some of this known information. Starting with your y-axis as far up as you can, working around to your x-axis, you want to do your 2, 3, 4, and 6 for your pies. And this is going to be the same all the way around. From top to bottom, 2, 3, 4, 6 in that order. Then from the very bottom of the y-axis, you do the exact same thing, working towards your x-axis, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And don't forget to do the opposite side. 2, 3, 4, and 6. Alright, that's all fine and dandy, but now we got to get our pies. So let's figure out where all the pies go. The numerator on these numbers are all going to have at least a pi in it, with the sole exception of here, which is a 0. Everywhere else has a numerator of pi. 180 is just pi, so we can go ahead and fill that in. And there's no symbol for it on here, so I'll have to handwrite it in, and my handwriting sucks. So here we go, starting numerator all the way around and done. Okay, so we have all the pies written out, but that's not right. Let's see here, we've got to figure out how to get the numbers that's in front of the pies. Now for your top right quadrant, there are no numbers in front of the pie, but you can use that to figure out your bottom left quadrant. Start with the 180 degree. It's just pi. There's no numbers in front of it. It is a single pi. So let's figure out how to get these. Well, what I do is I use the numbers directly across. So pi over 6 and pi over 6. Well, the bottom left doesn't need to be pi over 6, but I use the bottom and add the top number, the denominator and numerator, to get a 7. The same thing from the 4 straight across is pi over 4. 1 pi over 4. So 4 plus 1 is 5. I do the exact same thing for the pi over 3's. 3 plus 1 is 4. So you get your 7 pi, 5 pi, and 4 pi's. Okay, well, that's easy for that one, but what about the other two quadrants that we're missing? Well, same concept for the bottom number. It's 2 plus 1 is 3, so that works, but the other ones won't. That's why I have these numbers up here. I remembered 5, 7, 11. So we'll go ahead and plug them in on the bottom right quadrant, 5, 7, and 11. This is the easiest way I've figured out how to memorize this quadrant. It's just to know those numbers. Now, to figure out the top left quadrant, quadrant 2, we're going to use the same concept using the 11 pi over 6 directly across to the pi over 6. Now, what does 6 add to equal 11? And that's going to be 5. You can also go 11 minus 6. The same thing for the 4. You can do 7 minus 4 equals 3, or figure out what does 4 have to add to equal 7. And in this case, it is 3. And for the very last one, we've got 5 pi over 3 as its direct opposite. So 5 minus 3 is 2, or you can figure out what 3 adds to equal 5, which is also 2. So we've got all of our pi's figured out. So now we got to figure out our x and y coordinates, or in this case, they're going to be known as cosine and sine. All right, the easiest ones to start off with are the 90-degree angles, 0, 90, 180, and 270, because they use the x and y coordinates exactly. Since x is 1 point away from the center, and y is not moved at all, it's 0, your x and y coordinates are going to be 1 and 0. So there's your center, and this is your x coordinate, and that's where you get your 1. And then your y does not move up, so you have your 0. Same concept for 90 degrees and 180 and 270. The one thing you need to watch out for on the 180 and the 270s are your negatives. Since you're going backwards by 1 for your x coordinate, your 1 is negative, and your 0 is just 0. For the 90 degree, y only goes up 1, so your coordinates are 0 and 1, which is your x, y, or your cosine and sine. Since you're going down for 270, but still not moving over left or right, your x coordinate is 0, and your y is negative 1, also known as cosine and sine. Hey, so those are the easy ones. Now what about the rest? Well, keeping in mind your negatives and positives, we're going to put them in later. First, we just want to get the numbers in. So how do we do that? Well, first thing is that every single denominator for the rest of these is going to be 2. For the unit circles that we're filling out, the denominator is 2. So you can go ahead and put the 2's in all the way across the board. And done. Easy enough. We're pretty much halfway there. Alright, so how to figure out the rest? Well, first of all, the 4 coordinate, or the pi over 4, is going to always be the same. Anywhere you see a 4 in the denominator, a 2 is going to be for the numerator for your cosine and sine, or x and y coordinates. Don't worry about the square roots right now. That will be added in momentarily. Okay, well, let's go ahead and add that to everywhere there's a 4 in the denominator. And done. Also, we'll worry about the negatives and pluses later. Okay, so we've got that. That means we've got 2 more to do. Pi over 3 and pi over 6. Alright, an easy way that I know how to do this is you take your 6 and your 3. Well, 3 is half of 6. So my x value, or my cosine is going to be half. Yep. Well, what's half of 6? Well, 6 is going to be 3. So 3 over 2 will be the cosine for pi over 6. Now for the sines and cosines of pi over 3 and pi over 6, you just switch them. Now, for the rest of the unit circle, anywhere there is a 3 in the denominator, it's the exact same sine and cosine as pi over 3, with the exception of the negatives and pluses. So you can go ahead and fill in anywhere you have a 3 in the denominator with 1/2 as your cosine or x value and 3 over 2 for your sine or y value, and the same for pi over 6, the reverse. And done. Alright, so that's all the numbers. Now we just got to add all the symbols. So everywhere on the top left quadrant the x value is negative, we need to put minus sign in front of those numbers. Now these can be done in any order. These are just the order I do it in because it's easiest for me to remember. Third quadrant. You can see that I made a mistake. So I put the minuses in front of the x values, and they should have been in the y values. And this could really screw you up for the rest of test or whatnot. So make sure you don't do that. That's pretty much it for the positives and negatives for the unit circle. Now we need to add in a square root. The square roots go over everything with a denominator and denominator. The square roots will go over the numerators of the equations or of the x and y values. The one thing you should note is that the square root of 1 is 1, so you can leave it off or add it if you so feel. So we're going to go and add it onto all the numbers that currently do not have it. While I'm doing this, one thing I should note is that this will give you your cosines and sines of all your pi's, your 5 pi's over 4s, your 7 pi's over 6, all of those. You can use this as a good way to memorize when you're asked a question, what is the cosine of x? So let's say if it's something pi over 6, you will always have a square root of 3 over 2 as your cosine, regardless of what pi over 6 it is. If it's in this unit circle, you just have to worry about if it's a positive or negative. One way to help with the sign is just reverse it. If they say what is the sine of something over 6, then you're going to figure out what the cosine is of something over 6 is square root of 3 over 2, and just switch it to 1/2, and then you have to worry about if it's positive or negative. I hope this helps, and this is technically how I do it for all my tests when I write out my unit circle, except it goes much faster, and some of the techniques I use here are combined and done all at the same time. Thank you, and have a good day.